Imbento Lang.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Imbento Lang, the show where we delve into the minds of Filipino inventors and innovators who have left an indelible mark on science and technology. I'm your host, Steve, and today we have the privilege of sitting down with a distinguished figure whose contributions to the field of chemistry have not only shaped academic landscapes, but have also had a profound impact on the scientific community in the Philippines. Our guest today is none other than Dr. Fabian Antonio Dayrit, or fondly called Dr. Toby. Dr. Toby is a luminary in the world of chemistry who has been a beacon of knowledge at the Ateneo de Manila University since 1983. Dr. Toby's journey is a testament to his commitment to education, research, and the pursuit of scientific excellence. Dr. Dayrit's influence extends beyond the academic realm. As the president of the Integrated Chemists of the Philippines since 1996, he has been a driving force in advancing the chemistry profession in the country. Beyond the boardrooms and laboratories, Dr. Dayrit is a passionate researcher. His interests in natural products, chemistry, and environmental chemistry have resulted in groundbreaking studies, including the potential use of virgin coconut oil against COVID-19. His commitment to scientific research has not gone unnoticed, with numerous publications, awards, and recognitions under his belt. Join us as we uncover the stories of Filipino inventors. This is Imbento Lang, and I'm your host, Steve. Stay tuned for an enlightening conversation with Dr. Fabian M. Dayrit. So, Dr. Toby, welcome to the studio.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Nice to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Right, let's get on with it. Could you briefly describe to me yourself and how you managed to arrive at this scientific endeavor that you're working on with your products?
Well, actually, it all started, I guess, with my PhD. I went to Princeton, and at that time, this was 1976. You choose a school, you look at publications. At that time, they were all printed. Anyway, I was interested in chemical synthesis. So the PhD project I worked on was the step in the chemical synthesis of drugs. And this step was eventually used by drug companies to synthesize prostaglandins. And then I did a postdoc on a similar topic, making amino acids. But then at that time, I thought, well, whatever I do is really just going to make the companies richer. So when they do something more helpful to people. And then at that time, I got interested in medicinal plants, natural products. So these are the chemicals which are found in plants. And this is all, I just took books from the library, and then I read about it, and I became fascinated with because actually plants are probably the best chemists around. They synthesize so many compounds. And so I learned about it, and I thought, well, maybe I'd be helping more people if I went back home and, did something along those lines. This was in 1982. Well, actually, yeah, I finished my postdoc in 1982. That was martial law. So, I was taking a big risk coming back. But anyway, I came back, and I started working on medicinal plants. A lot of it was self-taught because I had trained in other techniques. So I guess the first lesson in doing this is you have to be willing to learn new things. You may have a PhD, but if the project means that you learn new things, then you learn it. And so I learned techniques of medicinal plants. And the first plant I worked on, fortunately, and I guess a lot of this is also my connection, my father, because my father was a member of the National Integrated Program on Medicinal Plants.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they'd selected Lagundi, Vitex Nagundo, as a good candidate to develop. And so I worked on Lagundi. I worked in it for about 4 or 5 years. And the result was that we found some of the compounds which have the activity to which Lagundi is known for. So it's an antitussive. It's also antiviral, but that needs a bit more research. So Lagundi became the first medicinal plant to be recognized by then BFAD because there were clinical studies and there was chemistry behind it. So that was my first real, I guess, contribution to this field.
Right, right. And then, of course, Lagundi right now is kind of like used for coughs and other respiratory distresses.
Yeah, it's being exported. Actually, at that time, Pascual Laboratories had the first rights to making it. Now there are a lot of companies now that make Lagundi, and it's a ₱1 million plant. So simple things, humble things like medicinal plants can be developed. And what I liked about working on medicinal plants is that you not only help, of course, you come up with a plant drug which people can use safely because there's actually no ill effects with Lagundi. It's a very good plant. But you help the farmers. So there are a lot of farms now that make grow Lagundi. So one of the things I liked about working on medicinal plants is that you help the whole range of people, from farmers to pharmaceutical companies, and all the way, of course, to the consumers. So I think that's the type of contribution I'd like to make.
That's so amazing. You get to work with these larger companies, and at the same time, you get to help the smaller ones. Those are the grassroots, the farmers themselves. Could you tell me a little bit about how you work with these farmers, and what were their reactions in the first use of Lagundi?
Well, the farm, we visited some of the farms, and the next step with medicinal plants is standardization. So you have to teach the farmers as well as the producers how you can keep the quality, because plants by themselves are variable. If you grow it one way, then you get a different product than if you grow it another way. So they may be safe and useful, but then you have to improve the variability. So that's the main challenge of one of the main challenges of working with medicinal plants is maintaining quality, because you're working with natural plant material.
Right. And are there any other repercussions if they don't have those standards in place?
Well, you may have a batch which is not as effective. So, if you want to keep the confidence of the people, then, of course, in a regular drug, it's 50 milligrams of a certain active ingredient. You're more sure that it's 50 milligrams, so you get the effect of 50 milligrams. But then you take a plant drug, then how do you ensure that they get the same effect? So that's the next step of the challenges. You may have discovered or helped in developing a medicinal plant, but the next step is maintaining quality.
Right, right. And let's go to your discovery or study on virgin coconut oil. How did that came about?
Well, actually, that's also from my father. Actually, my father is very influential in what I've done. But my father, first of all, is a pharmacologist. So he worked for Unilab, so he knows all about drugs. He also did cardiology, so he's also a cardiologist. He's always believed in coconut oil ever since. Anyway, he did the first small study on using coconut oil. At that time, it was Minola, the cooking oil. Yeah. This is in 1997. And at that time, it was against HIV. So he tested it on about 25, 30, small clinical study. It was done at DOH, the hospital in Tayuman. And it gave positive effects. It gave good effects, but it was a small study. But anyway, what he asked me to do was give me some coconut oil and say, here, analyze this, because he wanted to know the fatty acid profile. So I came into it, just helping my father out with the fatty acid analysis of coconut oil. And then, over a few months and years, I read about it and said, oh, this is a good product. This is in around the year 2000, so very early. At that time, some manufacturers started making VCO. So it wasn't called VCO before then, but now it's well established what virgin coconut oil is, and that was the rise of VCO, and now it's a very big coconut product. So anyway, to make a long story short, I started again reading up a lot on it. If you're following all this thing about saturated fat, one of the enemies of coconut oil is the American Heart Association. So while you're trying to show the benefits of coconut oil, you're also fighting this battle with the American Heart Association, because they tell you that VCO or coconut oil will raise your LDL and you'll die of heart disease. And my father's a cardiologist, so he knew that wasn't true. So I mean that thing's continuing. But in the meantime, we've worked to improve the status of virgin coconut oil, and that was now about 22 years already.
Right. And so you mean to say the produce of the coconut tree, the tree of life itself, has some, you've mentioned HIV properties, antiviral properties, so you say?
Yeah. It's antiviral. But I guess if you talk about antiviral, then you can fast forward to COVID.
Yeah. Because,
in December of 2019, the reports were coming out in China that there is people dying of a virus. I guess maybe move a few years back, there was the first SARS outbreak was in, I think, 2013. Actually, my brother was...
03 probably, though.
Yeah, even 203. Yeah. Anyway, my brother was Secretary of DOH then.
Dr. Manuel Dayrits.
Yes, and it was controlled because of tight regulations, etc. In 2019, it wasn't, because Chinese tourists were all around, and of course it was spreading all over the world.
Sure.
So I thought about it and says, maybe VCOs. And this wasn't something that I picked from thin air. So I read the literature and said, oh, maybe VCOs might have a good effect on this. So I wrote a paper in January it came out January 2020. So COVID-19 was just at the beginning. It wasn't declared a pandemic until March. So instead of publishing it in a journal, which would have to wait 6 months for publication, I put it up on the internet. And it was written as a paper, publication, complete with references. And people read it, and I showed it to the UST and said, and this was already during COVID, it's a lockdown, March, April. I convinced them, why don't you give me a little money? We'll do a in vitro study on it.
What does that mean, though?
Well, in vitro study, you do it in test tubes.
Okay.
But of course, there were no labs here that could handle the COVID-19 virus. So you needed a special laboratory that can do a biosafety lab, level 3, which can handle the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And there was a lab in Singapore that had isolated it. Fortunately, Dr. Lopez of biology department did his postdoc in that laboratory. So we contacted them and asked them, can you do this work for us? It takes about 6 weeks of work. So they did an in vitro study, and the results were fairly positive, and they showed that there was promise in it. So from that, we were able to convince PCHRD, DOST, to fund a clinical study. So this was a study on people. So these were people who had mild SARS COVID-19. This was the first clinical study, which was done in Santa Rosa, Laguna. And FNRI, Food and Nutrition Research Institute, did a clinical study. We had about 70 patients. This was still the Wuhan virus.
Okay.
Because this was done around August, September of 2020. And the results were good. Those who took VCO had faster relief from COVID-19. And the other parameter was they looked for this, it's called C-reactive protein. It's a marker for inflammation. So if your inflammation is high, if you have an infection, then your level is high. And then if you relieve your inflammation, it goes down. And we show that the C-reactive protein dropped faster with those who took VCO.
Oh, okay.
And that work was published in 2021.
Yeah, I remember you having media coverage on that one for publishing that paper. Where is VCO right now? What are you working on in terms of, is it still on antiviral properties, or are you looking for other applications of this product?
Well, then there's a second clinical study on COVID-19, 2021. Now, in 2021, the virus that was all around was the
kind of like another variant.
The other variant of COVID-19, and it showed it also worked. Actually, the results were very similar to the first one. So we showed that even for the different SARS-CoV-2 virus, the VCO worked.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and of course, those were clinical studies. But I had friends who said that they took it and they were all around patients and they didn't get COVID.
Right.
Interestingly, there was a publication in Italy of hospital workers, some of whom had high levels of a metabolite that you get from coconut oil, but they probably got it from maybe milk, because milk actually has lauric acid. And those who had high levels of this compound in their blood, monolaurin, didn't get COVID, while those who didn't have that compound in their blood came down with COVID.
Is that the magic ingredient, Doc?
This is a correlation, so you still need to prove it. Yeah. But the indications are that VCO works, and I think it probably works against any lipid-coated virus. So it may be good not just for SARS-CoV-2, but for other viruses, and that's probably the next
right.
Next
There's
step.
still more things to do, right?
Yeah, more things to do.
Doc Toby, you've touched on your inspirations and how you got to where you are right now in your studies and research. But most people don't realize that research is kind of like not just methodological. It has some sort of creative aspect into it. Could you describe to us if what you consider something creative about doing research, Doc?
Well, it's true. When we say scientific, you really follow, methods, and so you think that all you have to do is just to master the methods, and you get to the answer. But actually, you have to at key places you have to inject your insight. So it's the insight that makes it creative. So it's not just like from A you go to B to C to D. If you did that, then it's like you're just doing things from a textbook. And maybe you can get at something doing that. But if you're doing something that's not standard, then you can't follow standard methods. So basically, apply that working on VCO. You know how it works, but then if you have to inject at specific points something creative, something that people haven't thought of before, and that's a creative process. So because of that, then it's really the insight that makes it creative. So you have to master both the technique, but then you look back and with analysis and creativity, you discover a better way of doing things and come up with new insights to it. So it's a combination of both mastery of the technique, mastery of the the theory, as well as creativity. And I think that's what makes a difference. So I encourage them to do this. I encourage people, you really have to master the technique, but then don't get stuck with it. As I say, if you're just going to follow the book, then you're not going to discover anything new, right? Because they're all in the book,
right? Because there may be other ways, Doc, to do things, right? And
so it means knowing things and then stepping back and then analyzing, is this really the best way of doing it?
Of course, research isn't always rainbows and all these butterflies, right, Doc? Have you had any frustrations with, say, your data or your studies, and things aren't moving the way you'd expect it to be?
Well, in general, they're moving in the right direction, but they're moving too slowly because we really don't invest. Well, in general, we don't invest enough money in science. So it's not just the research I'm doing, but many aspects of science are not funded as well. So we have to put more money in that. And I think what I like about doing work on VCO as well as on medicinal plants is that you actually help entire society, from the farmers to the manufacturers. So you're actually helping the grassroots farmers all the way to industry.
Right.
And
I'd like to touch on that, Doc. And it's like you're not you can't do it by yourself. So more on, was collaboration a big part of your journey in discovering these products?
Yeah. Well, especially if you're working in this area, because you're working in something medicinal. So of course you do I do the chemistry. That's what I'm trained in. But you have to work with biologists, especially to do bioassay. You have to work with doctors if you can do clinical studies. Well, you have to work with farmers. You have to work with industry. We did a project on to upgrade the quality of VCO in 2018. In that project, we worked with producers. We worked with biologists. We worked with food technology because you have to do organoleptic tests on VCO.
You're kind of doing a holistic.
Yeah, it has to be holistic. And then what was important there was we wanted to raise the standards of VCO, but then we wanted to raise the level of industry as well. So I thought it's useless to raise a standard and then industry can't comply with the standard. So we wanted to make sure that we work with them so that the standard that we have, produces, VCO of good quality. At the same time, you can train industry to attain those standards, which I think is very important. So, that's I think that's a good way of developing things.
Sure. Of course, working in a COVID lockdown was really tough, I would assume, especially for a product development that would require laboratory use. How did you guys manage to cope, and how did you address those challenges?
Well, of course, you have to manage with the restrictions. We weren't a lot of people. In fact, when we were doing the work, we were the only ones on campus.
Oh.
So we had the whole campus to ourselves. It was very quiet. But those are special circumstances. Hopefully, we don't have to work under those circumstances. But, you have to adjust.
But then, is it the same with your collaborators as well, Doc? Did they cope differently?
Yeah. Everyone has to, meet the same restrictions. So, COVID is COVID.
And we've talked about the setbacks and challenges, but is there like a particular instance where there is joy, a sense of accomplishment in terms of you realizing, Doc, that this particular product has made an impact or has made it?
Yeah, well, I guess I take the case of VCO. Right now, I'm the chair of the Scientific Advisory Committee for Health of the International Coconut Community. The International Coconut Community is it is established in the 1970s under United Nations ESCAP. So these are coconut producing countries. At that time, there were about 18. Now we're up to 25. It's government. The members are all government ministries. It's based in Jakarta. Well, in terms of VCO, I'm the one who does all the research on coconut oil. So I mean the health aspect of coconut oil.
Dr. Toby, let me go back to your process of discovering and your research. Is there any particular aspect on which you find a certain process creative, or in terms of those areas?
Well, first of all, of course, you have to learn about the plant or material itself. You have to know all the background, but then you have to do your own interpretation. For example, in the case of VCO, if you just depended on what they say, what the Americans say, you're not going to touch it. But then if you know what the science is, then you know enough to challenge them. And actually what I've realized is that they don't know enough chemistry. I mean, the medical doctors actually, they don't. And so you have to know what your product is. You have to know, in this case, you have to know a bit about the health aspects. And then you put things together. Is what they're saying true or not? And then based on that, you can challenge things. And I think that's the same thing with medicinal plants. So it's really putting your own knowledge together, interpret what's in the literature. So it's...
You're kind of synergizing and integrating what you've learned, and plus your interactions with the actual people who grow it and use it, right? So even with your creative process, Doc, how does kind of like working with the users affect you coming up with a solution?
Well, I'm a chemist, so I apply the chemistry to the product. For example, one of the main complaints about VCO is that it gets rancid quite easily. So then you have to find out, why does it get rancid? So it's actually moisture and also bacteria. So if it's not well done, then you have traces of bacteria and moisture, then it becomes rancid. So you put those together and you teach them or tell them that to produce good VCO, you have to make it in this way, avoid certain things, good manufacturing practice. So it's all based on what you know about the chemistry, what's going on. So yeah, I think that's what makes, at least that's what works for me, at least for the products that I'm working on. Same thing with medicinal plants, because they degrade over time, their compounds. So the challenge there is, how do you maintain the quality? So again, you have to know the chemistry. I guess I'm pushing chemistry. So for those of you out there, there's a lot you can do with chemistry.
And for those who are not in the field but would want to like cultivate the spirit of innovation and discovery and curiosity, what would you advise to our listeners?
Well, I would advise you look at the data, look at what people say, and then you have to dig deeper, because you have to judge, is what they're saying true? And then you have to, especially in this field, since it's, there are a lot of things involved in it, you have to study whether you think it's right or not right. And then challenge yourself. And you can arrive at a certain point that this is the way to go.
Right. Like, even now, fake news is very rampant nowadays. And
yeah. Especially in the medical field, because some of the publications are funded by by drug companies. So you have to, learn to read them.
Had you had your fair share of having to address fake news, though?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Could you tell us more about it, though? Especially relating to the products that you've discovered.
Well, a few years back, there was this German, actually there's a lot of them connected with Harvard. They say that, coconut oils will kill you or something, cause heart disease. So, but those are actually easy to refute. But, you have to tell them, bring out the science, say that what you're saying is wrong.
Look at the facts.
Yeah.
And how has this innovation journey kind of shaped your outlook of the future? Are you more optimistic about what's going to happen for VCO and even Lagundi?
Well, you should never stop where we are because VCO is now it's a established product, but you have to innovate. So you have to develop, go beyond VCO, basically develop new products. And there are many possibilities for doing that. Same thing with Lagundi. Right now, they're selling the crude material, but then you can move further than that. So we shouldn't stop with where they are. Innovations needed for all of these.
Right. Like being open to all the possibilities and opportunities that you could have, and not just being trapped into, the product that you really care about, but even acknowledging that some things that this path might take you, right? So are there any upcoming projects or inventions you're currently working on aside from these?
Well, I still looking for opportunities, working with plants. As you know, in the iPod, bamboo is actually a very good product. It's good for sustainability, and there's things you can make from it. So there are actually a lot of opportunities for doing more work in this area. And what I like about it is that you can help farmers, all the way farmers to industry, and I think that's a good way to go.
That's true. So, any final thoughts or stories you would like to share with our audience before I let you go down?
Well, I guess it's a never-ending process of learning. What you realize is that what you know is probably good for about 3 or 4 years, and then if you just stay that way, then you're gonna fall behind, or at least you won't develop anything new. So you have to keep going. And there will always be disappointments. Support is not always there. Mm-hmm. But in the end, I think it's also the amount of effort and thinking about the people that you can help with what you're doing. So I'm happy that what I've been able to do. You're able to help a lot of people with the research that you do. So even reading books, reading journals can actually help poor people if you're working on the right thing.
Okay, that has been Dr. Fabian Antonio Dayrit, Doc Toby, and this has been Imbento Lang. Thank you for tuning in.